You're Cuban American.
That's correct.
Do you think that, but you weren't here during the Civil War, though? Your family wasn't here during
the thing about that is that this is the South, and everybody that moves here needs to conform to the South. That's it. You know, this is federal occupied Dixie.
Do you think that the South would have been welcoming of your family at that time?
Oh, absolutely.
That fiery individual there is Christopher Monzon. As you saw there, he's known as in South Florida as the Cuban Confederate. The Cuban Confederate. He's also become a darling of the right wing, of course, and also is wiggling himself into political campaigns, which we're gonna find out as well. But also Marco Rubio has his name on his Twitter, not necessarily in his mouth. So Monzon is a canvasser for Marco Rubio, by the way. And this week, Rubio claims that he was brutally beaten by 4 strangers, all for being a Republican. We'll look for some of that proof. In fact, we'll see what the police have to say as well. But it turns out, you guys, though, that it's a little bit more complicated. The police had a different report than what Marco Rubio had. First, here's Rubio's tweet. He said, last night, one of our canvassers wearing my t-shirt and a Desantis hat, oh my God, what a combination, was brutally attacked by 4 animals who told him Republicans weren't allowed in their neighborhood in Hialeah in Florida. He suffered internal bleeding, a broken jaw, and will need facial reconstructive surgery. It's a devastating attack that happened to this guy. But he didn't mention his name, as we know. But the Daily Beast did point out the Rubio volunteer is not named in the incident report, but was later identified, as we do know now, by Hialeah Mayor Esteban Bovo to CBS News as Christopher Monzon. So it's been confirmed. It's not just some random person saying it. It's an authority that knows who this guy is. So it turns out Rubio tweeted about this attack. It's different, as I mentioned, from this police report. This is what they said. An incident report filed by the arresting officer and provided to the Daily Beast by the Hialeah Police Department makes no mention of a political motive, despite what Marco Rubio said in that tweet, which was they said, we don't want no damn Republicans around here, whatever the hell he said. Anyone saying anything about Republicans or the other 3 people Rubio claimed were involved. No mention in this police report of those things. Javier Jesus Lopez. He's a 22-year-old warehouse worker who lives down the street from where the altercation took place, though. He now faces a felony charge of aggravated battery. Here's the mugshot of the man who attacked the Cuban conservative or Confederate, sorry. Don't mess up his title there. So the police report said this happened. Again, think about what Marco Rubio said in the police report. Back the blue, keep all that in mind. Lopez confronted the victim and stated that he could not pass through the sidewalk in front of his residence. The victim proceeded to walk towards the street to avoid the defendant, at which point the defendant stated to him, you can't pass by here, this is my neighborhood. The victim then stated to the defendant, this is public property and I can be here if I want to. A bit of an altercation went down. And the police report says there's nothing about Republicans mentioned in it. At this point, Lopez and the volunteer began to have a verbal dispute, after which Lopez allegedly grabbed the man and proceeded to slam him against the floor. Then the fight started and the Cuban Confederate began to lose. That's when a 3rd man, we're talking about all these people here, stepped in and kicked Lopez, the attacker, in the face, but fled before police arrived. It's according to the incident report. So we don't know who that guy was or even if he kicked him in the face, this is what the report says. Lopez then punched the Rubio volunteer multiple times with closed fist, causing him to have a severe swelling on the right side of his face and his right eye being completely shut. Lopez continued striking the volunteer on his mouth, causing a severe swelling and bleeding. So really fast. He wasn't attacked by 4 people, by 1. They had an altercation and fight. Maybe Lopez was being overly aggressive. He didn't like him on his sidewalk. He's allowed to be in a public place. A fight broke out and he got beaten up by this guy. Apparently some person tried to step in. They got 1 lick in and took off. That's the first part here, Sharon. What are your thoughts here? Because again, I think a lot of times from Marjorie Taylor Greene saying the left is already coming, they're killing us now, to then Marco Rubio saying this based off of this canvasser of his, which we'll get into who he is. But this attack, first of all.
Yeah, and it sounds like I potentially it was a good Samaritan, right? Who came up and tried to help out and kick the defendant now in the face. It's just a messy situation. But the whole tweet, let's just focus on the senator. Okay, the tweet about this went down and Republicans. Jussie Smollett, didn't Jussie Smollett get in trouble in Chicago for, he was on his way to Subway and claimed a bunch of stuff went down. I'm not saying it's to that degree, but truth does matter.
It does matter. And by the way, if you want to make it a political thing, if you're slanting it a certain way, and as many conservatives like to say whenever something happens, let's not jump to conclusions to see what the police say. The police said something and it hasn't been the conclusion that you came up with. So the question is, why would you come to that conclusion? Is it a political thing? Are you using your canvasser to promote yourself or to demote the stances of your opponents? Let's go to more details about Christopher Monzon and his past. Here's a headline from a few years ago. Man was arrested after jabbing a Confederate flag at people. Maybe it's the Cuban Confederate. He's always got his Confederate flag. He faced charges of aggravated assault, inciting a riot, and disorderly conduct. So this was in 2017. He was the only counter protester also fighting against changing names of these streets and stuff after Confederate soldiers. He was out there fighting. Could have been some of the stuff from the beginning of this here now. So he began, again, he stabbed his Confederate flag at people and he was then arrested really fast. Let's watch that video. He was also at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, where counter protesters to these neo-Nazis were killed. Let's watch that.
I intend to stand for the South and die for it if need be. They will not replace us.
Graphic 13, you guys, this is the last thing before I jump back to your thoughts here, Sharon. Graphic 13, there was some texts that Monzon sent. He has not denied it. They were also linked to the website. Phone numbers listed on the website that is also owned by him. So I guess you can take that as a connection to it. Here's some of those texts that this guy sent. He says, LOL, dirty N-words love abusing power. That's why in N-word run countries, there are always dictators. Kind of like what they want here. Also, too bad Jews decided our foreign and domestic policies. Oh, cracking right on. I'm sure he's hanging over freeway exits or overpasses, praising Kanye West as well too. It's just how these things work. So again, this was the guy who got into an altercation and was told that we're told that it's because he's a Republican, he's wearing a Marco Rubio shirt. But what we haven't heard yet, Sharon, is why does Marco Rubio have people like this canvassing for him?
And that's really the issue. I think this gentleman, for lack of a better word, is unwell. He's unwell. I'm not a doctor. I don't know all the ways, but there's an issue here. There's a problem. Why is a US senator who ran for the United States presidency and will again, co-opting his message and co-opting him and inserting himself? Can't you think of somebody else to steal their message and attach your giddy up to? I mean, that is really where we need to concentrate here.
And will he though? And the thing is, I don't think the tweet's going to be, edited or taken down or even clarified. The point was to get that immediate, oh my God, they're coming for us. And what is that given response? As they've been riling up their fans ever since. It's time to attack. Let's just keep it real. We saw it from Marjorie Taylor Greene like crazy.